The red light of the Syrexian security alert pulsed through the trade terminal like a warning shot to the eyes. Mark Walker didn't need the blaring sirens or the metallic thud of armored boots behind him to know he was in trouble. He could tell the moment that customs agent's tentacles stiffened mid-stamp that something had gone very, very wrong. "You can't be serious," he muttered, as 4 towering Syrexian enforcers boxed him in with practiced coordination. One held up a glowing hexagonal datapad. "Mark Walker of Earth, you are hereby detained for trafficking destabilized subquark batteries, in violation of Galactic Trade Act 728. "What the hell even is a subquark battery?" Mark asked, backing into the cold terminal wall. "I fix coolant pumps for a living. My ship barely runs on its own juice." "You resisted inspection. You possess contraband schematics. We have probable cause," the officer replied, stepping closer. "No, Mark tried to duck, but a thick metallic limb hooked around his midsection and yanked him backward. The sudden movement wrenched his torso, something inside giving with a sickening crunch. Pain shot through his rib cage like someone had jammed a steel rod under his lung. He cried out, clutching his side. "That's broken, you lunatics." His legs were swept from beneath him, and he hit the deck hard. Another jolt of agony flared up from his ribs, and a deep groan escaped before his vision blurred around the edges. "Resisting confirmed," another guard said flatly. Mark didn't answer. He couldn't. All he could do was gasp and cling to the throb in his side as they dragged him off the terminal floor, his boots scraping pitifully behind him. The Syrexian detainment facility smelled like burned algae and sterilized shame. Cold, buzzing lights cast a sickly green hue over every surface. Mark was shoved onto a bench in a processing room flanked by scanners, exam tables, and a flickering poster showing a happy detainee giving a thumbs up. "Medical attention. Now," he grunted, pressing his hand tightly against his left side. Every breath felt like sandpaper over a cracked windshield. "Injury reports will be logged post-intake," one of the guards droned, handing his case file to a bored-looking medic with a single vertical eye. "Biometric and blood scan first." "Of course," the medic sighed. "We'll make it quick." A tri-pronged needle hovered near Mark's arm. He flinched. "You sure it's sanitary?" he asked, eyeing the device. The medic didn't answer. A moment later, the needle clicked into his vein, and a faint hum filled the room as the scanner lit up. "Standard Earth, human blood, type O negative." The scanner beeped, then paused. Then flashed. A sudden, rising alarm tone blared through the medbay. On the screen, 3 bright words overlaid in pulsing red. "Release him, Your Majesty." Everyone froze. Mark blinked. "Wait, what?" The scanner repeated the message, louder now, as if it hadn't been heard properly the first time. "Release him, Your Majesty." The medic staggered back, dropping the scanner. A tech fainted against the wall. The nearest guard fumbled for a communicator. "Emergency override protocol, level Omega-3. We've got a potential dynastic reactivation." "What does that even mean?" Mark barked, barely sitting upright. "It means you may be royalty," the medic whispered, pale and trembling. "Ancient Syrexian bloodline. Last confirmed over 10,000 cycles ago. This scanner shouldn't even have that protocol still embedded." Mark tried to stand and immediately regretted it. His side screamed in protest, and he slumped back down. "Royalty? No, that's not. This is some cosmic-level mistake. You've got the wrong guy." "Silence," the head guard said. But this time, his voice cracked with uncertainty. "Move him, now, to the royal wing. Under watch. Inform the council." "I need an X-ray," Mark shouted as 2 guards hoisted him like a sack of potatoes. "And maybe a lawyer." They didn't take him to a cell. They took him to a palace suite retrofitted as a quarantine chamber. The walls gleamed gold. A cluster of protocol drones buzzed around his head, chirping about ceremonial garments, heritage rituals, and what posture best conveyed royal contemplation. Mark lay on an overstuffed cushion, swaddled in what looked like a bathrobe designed for an opera performance, wheezing through shallow breaths. "Seriously," he panted. "This isn't dramatic sighing. My rib is killing me. Can I get a scan?" "Your Majesty," said a hovering drone with a face like an upturned soup ladle. "Your blood is sacred. Traditional medicine is pending council approval." The healers of the ninth circle are en route for a spiritual readjustment ceremony. That sounds like it involves smoke and chanting, not a diagnostic table. We shall inform the council of your concerns, the drone said diplomatically. They can shove it. The drone hesitated. Your defiant wisdom is noted, Sovereign One. 6 hours passed. No one touched him medically. Drones flitted in and out, carrying feathered tablets, trays of glimmering fruit, and something that looked suspiciously like a ceremonial back-scratcher, shaped like a swan. The pain in Mark's side worsened with every breath. He asked for ice. He got a carved cube of translucent rock. He asked for water. He got a ceremonial infusion of something that tasted like minty tar. Please, he gasped at the next attendant. My rib's fractured. I know it is. It's been broken before. I can't breathe. Just get me an X-ray. A real one. You're resilient, the attendant said reverently. Just as the prophecies said. Mark groaned. I'm not a prophecy. I'm a mechanic from New Detroit with a bad knee and a fractured rib. Another drone chimed in. Your humble origins only confirm the legend. He let his head fall back. I hope someone's checking that blood test. 36 hours after the scanner's royal declaration, Mark finally got an actual medical team. Not priests, not ancestral energy readers. Real doctors, sort of. A squad of sterile-suited Syrexians, led by a medic with 2 translator droids, filed into the suite and began running silent tests. Mark was too tired to protest. Fracture confirmed, one muttered. Left 6th rib. No puncture, but surrounding tissue shows signs of trauma. Bruising on lower quadrant. Pain response high. Treatment is mandatory. Mark nodded weakly. Glad someone finally believes me. You will require 5 to 6 Earth weeks of restricted movement and monitored recovery, the medic added. We recommend elevation, consistent pain control, and avoidance of cultural ceremonies involving rapid dancing or ceremonial lifting. Mark chuckled weakly. You read my schedule already? The medic paused. Was that humor, Your Majesty? No, Mark said, closing his eyes. That was exhaustion. Just give me something that works. They injected a localized pain inhibitor, not magic, not instant relief, but enough to let him breathe without seeing stars. He dozed off not long after, cocooned in pillows he still didn't understand the function of. Elsewhere, behind 6 locked doors and a retinal scan vault, the original blood technician paced in circles. He hadn't spoken to anyone since the scanner flashed that impossible phrase. He reran the sample once, twice. The third time, he bypassed standard protocols and accessed deep archives buried in the ancient Syrexian genomic vault. The results made his neck frill tremble. Mark Walker's royal marker wasn't a fluke, but it also wasn't his own. It matched a decades-old refugee genetic strand, a Syrexian hybrid listed in a medical cross-match database on Earth. A blood transfusion, years ago. The royal override had triggered from donor contamination. The technician stared at the result in horror. Oh no. He reached for his communicator, knowing he was about to ruin an entire planetary crisis with a single, perfectly bureaucratic explanation. Mark woke to the soft hum of thermal regulators embedded in the suite walls and the unmistakable ache of having spent the night in a bed too soft for a body too broken. He blinked at the gilded ceiling, where a fresco of a many-armed Syrexian god seemed to be offering him a glowing sandwich. For one fleeting second, he thought he'd finally gotten pain meds strong enough to induce hallucinations. Then, a drone lowered from the ceiling with a polite chime. Good sunrise, Your Majesty. You slumbered with noble spasms, as foretold in the chronicles of Drift Petal Ascension. Mark blinked. Is that a book or a weather pattern? The drone paused. Unclear. He groaned and shifted upright, slowly and carefully. A sharp jab of pain reminded him that yes, his rib was still fractured, and no, sleep hadn't healed it. The medics the night before had fitted him with a light pressure wrap, standard compression stabilization, but warned against doing anything more strenuous than breathing. And even that had its limits. Your morning schedule includes ceremonial sock placement, a quiet blessing from the Third Circle healers, and an audience with the High Council. The drone continued. Mark grimaced. I'm not going anywhere today. The doctors said bed rest. We shall inform the council of your humble refusal to ascend, the drone said solemnly. No medical refusal, not philosophical. The drone twirled slightly, as if that made things better. Then the council shall meet you here. Great. 30 minutes later, 6 towering Syrexians entered the suite like a flock of nervous flamingos dressed in armor. Mark was propped up on a recliner, robe draped over one shoulder, a bowl of room-temperature broth resting precariously on his lap. The pain meds dulled the worst of it, but his side still burned if he twisted too far or laughed. Which was unfortunate, because everything about this was ridiculous. The leader of the council, a narrow-eyed Syrexian named Helveth, took the center of the room and cleared his throat with a sound like a kettle boiling through gravel. "Your Majesty," he began, "we are gathered to understand the nature of your return." "I didn't return," Mark said. "I arrived. Arrested, remember? Accused of smuggling something I couldn't even spell." Helveth ignored that. "The Royal Recognition Protocol has not misfired in recorded history. It is bound to a gene sequence last seen in the bloodline of Sovereign Hefril, who vanished during the dynastic migration over 10,000 cycles ago." Mark took a slow breath. "Look, I'm not trying to disrespect your dynastic narrative, but I don't have any royal blood. I've got a busted rib, a chronic limp from falling off a hiking trail 3 years ago, and a mechanic's license with a coffee stain. That's it." Another counselor stepped forward, draped in robes so ornate they rustled when he moved. "And yet, you ordered broth." Mark blinked. "Because I was hungry?" "The same dish Sovereign Hefril requested before his disappearance," the counselor said reverently. "Coincidence is the language of fate." Mark looked at the drone hovering beside him. "Are they serious?" "They are always serious," the drone replied. Helveth narrowed his eyes. "There is one who claims the blood test may have been compromised. A technician. He wishes to revalidate the sample." "Yes," Mark pointed weakly with his spoon. "Listen to that guy. He's probably the only person in this whole building who knows what a medical contamination error looks like." A murmur spread through the counselors. "To question the scanner is to question fate," one of them whispered. "To not question it is to let a hurt mechanic decide galactic policy," Mark retorted. "And I'm pretty sure your legal system doesn't allow someone to become a king because of clerical residue." Helveth frowned. "Clerical? Blood transfusion. On Earth. Years ago. Might have had a donor with weird genetics." Another murmur. This one edged with fear. "But the override," Helveth said slowly, "was absolute. Computers can glitch, even holy ones." "Sacrilege," one of the robed figures muttered. "Okay, look." Mark started to sit up straighter and hissed in pain. "Ow, okay, not a power move. Just, please, before you make me bless a field of sacred onions or whatever, just let the tech recheck the sample." "What's the harm?" "Loss of national direction," Helveth replied. Mark sighed. "Well, I can't even walk right now, so I'm not exactly marching your empire into the future." By late afternoon, the technician who had uncovered the contamination, Trellin, was brought before the council in Mark's medical chamber, which had become, by then, half throne room and half recovery bay. Trellin was shaking, not out of fear, but the kind of stress only data-based blasphemy could cause. He carried a small projector and activated it in the center of the room. The lights dimmed. "Original test results showed genetic markers consistent with the Hefril line," he began. "However, cross-analysis with the Universal Refugee Donor Registry revealed that Mr. Walker received a blood transfusion from a Syrexian Earth hybrid 5 Earth years ago, following a vehicular accident on his home planet. That hybrid's blood carried dormant royal alleles." "Which triggered the scanner?" Mark muttered. "Yes," Trellin said. "You were not the source. You were the conduit." Helveth's face was unreadable. "The override was engaged not by your genetics," Trellin continued, "but by a mismatch in data sanitation protocols, a simple oversight. The scanner was never designed to differentiate current blood from native DNA." Silence fell over the suite like a weighted blanket. "So, not royalty?" Mark asked. "Not biologically," Trellin confirmed. "However, under Syrexian law, the Royal Override Protocol cannot be legally reversed once executed, unless fraud or deception is proven." Helveth turned slowly toward Mark. "There was no deception, only misdirection by fate." Mark groaned. "You're really going to twist a lab accident into spiritual guidance?" "It's what we do," Helveth said, almost cheerfully. Trellin cleared his throat. Under Clause 472 of the dynastic bylaws, this situation qualifies the individual for honorary nobility status and diplomatic immunity. Charges must be dropped. Mark's breath hitched not from emotion, but from relief and bruised lungs. Immunity? He asked. Permanent. Trellin nodded. Also, ceremonial taxation exemption and the right to refuse all festivals involving aquatic livestock. Sounds like freedom, Mark whispered. By that evening, Mark had been officially cleared of all charges. A royal decree, complete with 10 ceremonial ink stamps and 3 separate harmonized bell chimes, was issued and broadcast across Sarek's Prime. He remained in the recovery suite, not as a prisoner, but as an honored guest. For the next week, his main activities included sleeping, avoiding ceremonial dances, and sipping what had now been named Hefrel broth in his honor. The council, unsure of how to proceed with a mechanical commoner turned accidental sovereign, offered him a permanent role as cultural liaison of multigenetic destiny. Mark declined. I just want to go home, he said. But your story has become our cultural spine, one counselor said. Then let me be the spine that supports from a distance, Mark replied. They eventually relented. 2 weeks later, once the fracture had calcified enough to permit normal movement and the medics confirmed he wouldn't collapse during atmospheric re-entry, Mark was cleared to leave. He departed Sarek's Prime with a medical certificate, a satchel full of ceremonial robes he would never wear, and a shiny diplomatic card that said, Majesty Emeritus in 5 languages. Also, an exemption from Syrexian taxes for life. As his transport ship pulled away from orbit, Mark leaned back with a long exhale, clutching his side only slightly out of habit. Next time, he muttered to himself, I'm checking the blood bank's privacy policy. Mark had been out of prison for 5 days. That didn't mean he was free. Technically, he was resting in the East Healing Pavilion of the Royal Bio Sanctuary, but the sheer number of protocol drones, ceremonial fabric deliveries, and council observation visits made it feel more like a particularly polite hostage situation. He could walk now, sort of. The rib had started healing properly, thanks to an alien mineral wrap that stabilized the fracture while respecting his sacred bone rhythms. He still needed to rest often and avoid laughing, twisting, or breathing too deeply, but at least he was finally off pain inhibitors that made his dreams feel like game show reruns. Today, he was parked in a recliner beneath a skylight shaped like a lotus, wearing breathable ceremonial loungewear and arguing with his nurse. I said no to the spicy eel paste, Mark groaned, shifting slightly. I'm not your sovereign digestive experiment. The nurse, a patient Syrexian, with textured orange skin and a scarf that changed color with her mood, folded her arms. It is the traditional dish for the week of the moon-dwelling ancestors. Well, the ancestors can keep it, Mark said, pushing the tray aside. Just give me the broth again, the regular kind. A passing acolyte, holding a clipboard, stopped mid-step. He requests the Hefrel broth again. It's not, fine, yes, the Hefrel broth, just not spicy this time. Your Majesty's restraint is noted and logged, the acolyte said with reverence before vanishing. Mark buried his face in his hands. If I see that soup on a flag, I swear. Within 2 days, he did. Not officially. But a peaceful protest outside the High Council Hall featured banners reading Broth over Blades and Hefrel Wisdom Heals. People were chanting recipes like prayers. A ceremonial ladle had become a symbol of peace. Mark watched the news feed from his bed, chewing slowly. I just wanted chicken soup, he said aloud. Indeed, said the drone next to him. And in doing so, Your Majesty has unified the provincial factions of East Murren and Upper Valhex through shared culinary diplomacy. Your accidental wisdom inspires many. That's not wisdom. That's sodium. Despite the revelation that his royal marker was an error, Mark's presence remained diplomatically explosive. The official story-contaminated transfusion, ancient bloodline echo had been released to the public. The traditionalists refused to accept it. The reformists used it as ammo for constitutional revisions. Meanwhile, Mark just wanted to recover. He spent mornings doing light stretches with a physical therapy bot that resembled a beanbag with legs. Afternoons were for council briefings, which he only agreed to attend remotely, propped up with pillows, sipping tea. Nights were for trying to sleep through palace noises that sounded like someone practicing underwater throat singing. The bruising on his side had faded. The rib was no longer agonizing, just tender. But the longer he stayed, the more political nonsense piled up. One morning, he was interrupted mid-therapy by a formal visitor, Counselor Drell, a silver-robed woman with a hawk-like stare and an ambition you could taste from 10 feet away. She bowed just enough to be polite. "Your Majesty." "Miss Drell," Mark said cautiously. "I come bearing an opportunity," she said, stepping closer. "Sarek's Prime is rethinking its traditions. We've been ruled by prophecy and genetic destiny too long. Your situation is a perfect catalyst for constitutional reform." "I'm not getting involved in your politics," Mark said immediately. "I'm still healing." "Precisely why you must speak now. Before the old guard rewrites history again, the people trust you. You didn't ask for power, you simply were, and you brought healing and humility." "I also brought a lawsuit for false arrest," he muttered. "We can make that disappear," Drell smiled faintly. "In return, you simply continue being yourself. Say nothing grand, say what you believe. Let the people see that royalty does not need divinity, it needs integrity." Mark hesitated. "So, you want me to accidentally change your government by not doing anything royal?" "Exactly. That might be the only job I'm qualified for." His bedside wisdom sessions began the next day. Not official speeches, not declarations, just quiet recordings, responses to letters, informal musings, and the occasional offhand comment about Earth habits. One clip, where he advised a young student to let yourself screw up a little before you figure out who you are, went viral. Another, where he described the pain of broken ribs as like being hugged by a bear that hates you, was adopted into Sarexian medical metaphors. A week later, Counselor Drell visited again, smiling like a hunter who just baited the perfect trap. "You've done it," she said. "Public confidence in the Council's divine authority has dropped 17 points. The youth now refer to you as the king who woke up late and told the truth." "I still can't sneeze without it being called a weather omen," Mark grumbled. "I sneezed yesterday and 3 provinces canceled fireworks." "A small price," Drell said. But Mark wasn't smiling. He noticed the shift, how the medics now bowed a little deeper, how the drones repeated his casual remarks, like mantras, how people stopped arguing why he was royal and just started treating him as inevitable. It was the same kind of blind trust that caused problems in the first place. That night he pulled up the diplomatic database and searched for independent representatives. One name stood out, Varen Sol, a neutral voice in the High Council, known for brutal honesty and refusing ceremonial titles. The perfect person to give the people a voice untainted by royal nostalgia or revolutionary zeal. He sent a message, "I need someone to replace me not with robes, but with reason." 2 days later, Varen arrived in person. A tall, gray-skinned Sarexian with no ornaments, no assistants, and a voice that didn't bother with ceremonial greetings. "You're the man in the bed who broke the empire," Varen said. "I tripped into a blood scanner," Mark replied. "The scanner did the rest." "I read your reports. Your thoughts on leadership are compelling." "I think leadership should involve being able to sneeze without causing national panic," Mark said. "Which means I'm not cut out for this." Varen studied him for a moment. "You're not the first royal I've seen fade into comfort, but you're the first I've seen try to escape it before the velvet noose tightens. I don't want a palace, I want an apology, and a ride home." "Done," Varen said. "In return, let me use your name." Mark blinked. "For what?" "To finish what you started, not a rebellion, a restructuring. Let me guide it, you go home." "Deal." They shook hands gingerly, because Mark's ribs still hated abrupt movement. By the 3rd week of his recovery, Mark was well enough to walk unassisted. He still wore a compression brace and moved like someone afraid of unexpected hugs, but he was officially cleared for interstellar travel. He was escorted to the spaceport with quiet ceremony. No fanfare, no music. Just Drell, Varen, and a small honor guard who looked like they weren't sure if they were protecting him or just saying goodbye. Drell handed him a carved token. "Your diplomatic immunity, universal, even on neutral worlds." Varen handed him a sealed data tablet. "Your endorsement. I'll release it tomorrow." Mark looked at both and exhaled slowly. "You know this all started because I got tackled in a terminal for something I didn't do." "That may be the most Sarexian origin story I've ever heard," Drell said with a smirk. Mark grinned and winced. Don't make me laugh, still healing. He boarded the shuttle and looked back only once. No banners, no chants. Just two Syrexians who understood that power was never about blood. His return to Earth was quiet. Customs didn't even blink at his ceremonial robes. They barely checked his diplomatic ID. One guard asked if Majesty Emeritus was a retirement package. It's more of a long story, Mark said. He limped back into his mechanic shop the next day, opened his favorite drawer, and found a stale protein bar that had outlived 2 revolutions. He smiled. Then sneezed. Nothing happened. Perfect. 3 months after returning from Syrex Prime, Mark stood on a step stool in his garage, elbow deep in a cooling duct that had no right making the sounds it did. His rib was healed, the limp from his hiking accident manageable again, and the only lingering pain came from having inhaled whatever fluid the broken duct just sprayed into his face. He cursed softly, pulled his head back, and blinked through the haze of synthetic coolant vapor. Guess I'm not too royal to fix a leak, he muttered. There was comfort in the ordinary now. Grease under his nails. The hum of a broken generator he could diagnose by sound alone. Back in his shop, surrounded by tools with personalities and machines that complained in whines and puffs, he felt like Mark again, not Your Majesty, not Hefrel Reborn, not even Majesty Emeritus. Just Mark Walker, mechanic, man with a back catalog of medical bills and a stubborn work ethic. The only real sign of his accidental royalty was the satchel on the shelf in the corner, where ceremonial robes, diplomatic credentials, and a tax exemption card too shiny to trust all collected dust. He hadn't touched them in weeks. It was better this way. He'd done what he'd promised, sent Syrex Prime back its problems, kept none of the power, and left with only what was owed: a clean record, a clear exit, and one quiet favor. Now it was time to use it. The Syrexian consulate on Earth was little more than a minimalist silver dome tucked beside a Hyperloop station in New Sydney. Inside, the air shimmered faintly with humidity, and the receptionist, a serene-looking Syrexian with violet eyes, stood before Mark with visible confusion. "You wish to file a retroactive pardon request?" she asked. "Not for me," Mark said, producing a small data chip. "I pulled the name off your arrest database before I left. Guy from New Caldera. Caught smuggling coolant recyclers to a colony station with 0 support. Same kind of thing I was accused of." The receptionist scanned the chip. "He's still in custody, awaiting tribunal. He's a fixer. He thought he was helping. There are regulations. There's also a clause in your constitution that grants the former Crown, limited clemency privileges in retrospect. I looked it up." The receptionist frowned. "You're using your final royal privilege on this?" Mark nodded. "One person, that's all I wanted." 2 days later, the man Eduardo Rames, 42, father of 3, part-time engineer, was released without charge. Mark didn't wait around for thanks. That wasn't the point. The point was proving to himself that even a mistake, genetic, political, cosmic, could still do something right. Back in his garage, business picked up slowly. A few clients came just to see the guy who sneezed and caused a peace treaty. Most left disappointed when he didn't have glowing eyes or hover thrones. But enough came for real repairs, and soon his schedule was booked solid again. He was replacing a fractured thruster bracket when his communicator buzzed with an encrypted file from Syrex Prime. A message from Varen's soul. Subject: Status update. Reforms. Mark wiped his hands and opened it. "Mark, you were right. Royalty isn't what we needed. But the myth of you let us have the conversation we'd avoided for too long. The council now has term limits. Citizens may vote on ceremonial customs annually. The phrase divine mandate has been removed from 12 key documents. Also, you'll be pleased to hear the Hefrel broth is now regulated as a dietary supplement, not a sacred relic. We've established a new annual observance, Clerical Clarity Day, in honor of database maintenance and clean medical records. One more thing, Drell's campaign to abolish the scanner override protocol passed unanimously. No more accidental kings. You were never our monarch, but you might have been our catalyst. Stay well, Varen." Mark laughed, which still tugged faintly at his side. Clerical Clarity Day. That was perfect. He didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. The galaxy spun on, politics churned, and people got scanned, healed, accused, exonerated, and tangled in bureaucracy, just like always. But somewhere out there, a file with his name remained on a secure server marked Override Anomaly, Resolved. A footnote in a dynasty that hadn't existed for 10,000 cycles. He hadn't been the hero they expected. But he'd shown them what to expect from themselves. And maybe that was enough. 3 months after that, Mark received a package. No sender, no return address, just a clean white box sealed with a diplomatic crest. Inside was a mug. Porcelain. Hand-painted, a single phrase etched in neat Syrexian script beneath a cartoon of him sipping soup in bed. His Majesty of Mistake, long may he nap. Mark stared at it for a long moment. Then placed it beside his coffee machine. He took a deep breath, deep enough that it didn't hurt anymore, reached for a wrench, and got back to work. The galaxy had turned upside down over a blood test. But now, at least, the paperwork was in order.